הנאהבים והנעימים בחייהם ובמותם לא נפרדו. If a measure of our worth is who mourns when we're gone, it's the rarest among us who are missed by not only friends and family, but also by people we touched without even knowing it. Sandy was such a person. She did more than teach. She impacted lives in ways that mattered, and tonight is a testament to that. When the family thought about a way to honor Sandy's memory, they knew it would not be through anything splashy or glitzy, since that never would have represented the Sandy that we knew. What would represent her would be the things that she held dear. Family, BT family, teaching and learning Torah, diversity and varied voices, the role of women in studying Torah and in women's involvement in Jewish life. The biological family is here. Les and Dodi and Joey, and even who she used to call Mr. Rafi. And of course, the Mukhlim. And they're conflated with the Beth Tefillah family, represented in the people who attended the programs that were her hallmark here at Beth Tefillah. What better place to honor Sandy's memory than where she spent most of her time? Her home away from home. Truly, Beiti, Beit Tefillah. Her bayit was Beit Tefillah. Her home here was her office across the hall from mine, and we would see each other every single day. And in fact, my sister passed away the day before, her yahrzeit is the day before Sandy's. And so when I called Dodi to commiserate, I told her that two of my sisters were gone, close to each other. And that's how we all felt in many ways about Sandy. In terms of teaching and learning, Me'am Loez has a beautiful commentary on the first mitzvah in the Torah, Pru Urvu, be fruitful and multiply. In a radical interpretation, Me'am Loez says that the mitzvah is not only fulfilled through procreation, but through Chidushei Torah, by telling new things about Torah. It is a general commandment. It's for religious creativity. It's for perpetuating Torah study in the world, and if that's the case, how many children Sandy can be said to have created. And because Sandy believed in that, she wanted to ensure that people from all walks of life, all strands of Judaism, all religious backgrounds, could study and learn together. So tonight, you will hear many voices, many words of Torah viewed through the lens of many different viewpoints and backgrounds, but always respectfully. What Sandy would have wanted, with harmony and with unity. Last week's Parsha has a phrase that is very telling and perhaps helps further to capture who Sandy was. Vayifrot ha'ish me'od me'od, vayhilo tzon rabot, u'shfachot, ve'avadim, u'gmalim, v'chemorim. The Parsha makes reference throughout the portion to Yaakov, and mentions Yaakov in very glowing terms throughout. It's only when the Parsha talks about things does it say ha'ish. A very, very almost impersonal way of referring to someone, ha'ish, because things don't matter. And when it's ha'ish, it's not Yaakov. It's when it's things, it's just a person. Sandy was the kind of person to whom things didn't matter. People did. And the world of the mind and the heart and the soul was where she spent her time. A wise man said that 100 years from now, it won't matter what kind of car I drove, what kind of house I lived in, how much money I had in the bank, but how important I was to the life of someone else. And Sandy, indeed, was important to our lives. But I'm going to throw out a challenge, if I may. I mentioned family, I mentioned Beth Tefillah family, I mentioned teaching and learning Torah, the diversity of varied voices. But the role of women in studying Torah and women's involvement in Jewish life was very central to Sandy. And I'm going to throw out a challenge. I'd like to point out that although it was important to Sandy, Dodi shared with me something, if I may share it with others, that reminded me of something in my past that tells me that we've come a long way, but we've got a long way to go. Dodi told me that she tried on more than one occasion when she was saying Kaddish to find a comfortable space in several shuls, and was often marginalized and had a difficult time finding a space that wasn't in a corner someplace in the shul. If you'd allow me a personal memory, I'll tell you that I discovered something, and I shared it with Dodi, that only many, many years later after it happened did I understand it. My father died when I was a little girl, and my little brother was only 3. And my mother would bring him to shul twice a day to say Kaddish. Now, what did a little 3-year-old child need to go to shul twice a day to say Kaddish when he could not even read Hebrew? And it was only many years later that I realized why my mother did that. She wanted to say Kaddish, and it wasn't done in our world. A woman didn't go to shul and didn't say Kaddish, and her prop allowed her to do that. She brought my little brother to shul so she herself could be the one to say Kaddish. And so here at Beth Tefillah, Rabbi Wahlberg, Rabbi Posner have worked very hard to give women a voice and a place at the table. I would extend that challenge to all of the shuls represented here, in Sandy's memory and in Sandy's honor. Hanehavim v'han'imim b'chayim uv'motam lo nifradu. Beloved and sweet she was in her life, and in her death she is not parted from us. Everyone dies, but not everyone really lives. Sandy did, and she does. And in her memory, many rabbis will share words of Torah, and I know that Sandy's watching, listening, and knowing that some of the most important people in her life are here, listening to the wide range of Torah voices in this town, beginning with our Moreh D'Atra, Rabbi Mitchell Wahlberg.
Good evening. Preceding this gathering, we had our Yafi scholars who have undertaken a year-long study of Jewish history. And in the class that I gave this evening, I pointed out how 2 great Orthodox Jewish German rabbis and scholars had taken absolutely contrary positions on an important question. In looking back at the past, what should we remember? Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the great scholar, rabbi, and leader of 19th century German Jewry, writes, "The Torah does not attempt to hide from us the faults, errors, and weaknesses of our great men, and precisely thereby it places the stamp of credibility upon the happenings it relates. The fact that we are told about their faults and weaknesses does not detract from our great men. Indeed, it adds to their stature and makes their life stories even more instructive." So according to Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, even the best of us have our flaws, and we've got to tell it like it is, flaws and all. On the other hand, the great German Jewish rabbi and scholar of the 20th century, Rabbi Shimon Schwab, who was the rabbi of the Glen Avenue Synagogue, became the leader of German Jewish community in Washington Heights, writes just the opposite. What ethical purpose is served by preserving a realistic historic picture? Nothing but the satisfaction of curiosity. We should tell ourselves and our children the good memories of the good people, their unshakable faith, their staunch defense of tradition, their life of truth, their impeccable honesty, their boundless charity, and their great reverence for Torah and Torah sages. What is gained by pointing out their inadequacies and their contradictions? So the question is, when remembering people of our past, should we remember just their virtues or their flaws as well? In remembering Sandy Vogel, we cannot find an answer to this question because in the years she was with us, I never heard a single person have a bad word to say about Sandy. And that's unheard of here at Beth Tefillah. In the eyes of all of us, she lived by the words of Shlomo HaMelech, Gam lasu tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayeha. She did good and no evil all the days of her life. And that's what made Sandy a master teacher of Torah. She didn't just teach it. She lived it. Allow me to repeat words I spoke about Sandy when she retired. The relationship that Sandy has developed with all of us here at Beth Tefillah is truly one of love. All of us here have our fans and have our critics, except maybe for Rabbi Wecker, but not Sandy. To know her is to love her. And it's based on that love affair that Sandy was able to build one of the finest adult education programs of any synagogue in America. And how did she do it? We're told that when Moshe gave over the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, V'chol ha'am roim es hakolos, and the entire nation saw the words. It really should have said, heard the words. But my father used to tell me, what most impressed the people was not simply what Moshe said, but the fact that they saw him live by the words. Sandy was able to teach us the values of Judaism because she valued Judaism. She lived by its principles. All of us were able to learn from Sandy because all of us want to be like Sandy, a devoted wife, mother, grandmother, a knowledgeable, committed, and beautiful Jew, and a lady of dignity and fineness. Let me add one more thought to these words. We all admired and respected and learned from Sandy because she not only lived by the words of the 4 books of the Shulchan Aruch, she lived by the 5th one as well. I have the story repeated in the notes. It's told of a young scholar who approached the early 20th century Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik and asked the rabbi to give him rabbinical ordination. Since ordination is normally given after testing the applicant's knowledge of the Shulchan Aruch, the rabbi began the examination by asking the young man to name the Shulchan Aruch's 5 volumes. Confused, the young student protested, but there are only 4 volumes in the Shulchan Aruch. No, the rabbi answered, there is a 5th unwritten volume. It's called Seichel, common sense. And unless you know this volume, your knowledge of the other 4 volumes will not help you at all. Seichel is a word that's hard to fully translate. Even more, it's hard to acquire. Either you got it or you don't. And Sandy had it in abundance. She never said the wrong thing. She knew when to speak out and knew when to remain silent. She knew when to lead and she knew when to follow. I valued her judgment. She was one of the only people I asked to read an advanced copy of my Yom Kippur sermon. My Yom Kippur sermon is the longest and most important of the year. It always focuses on human issues and family relations. Before I would deliver it, every year I would ask Sandy to read it and let me know if there's something in it that rubbed her the wrong way. And if so, I took it out of the sermon. I no longer have her seichel to judge my Yom Kippur sermon. So every year on Yom Kippur, when I recite Yiska, I remember her as well.
We're going to call next on Rabbi Stephen Exler, who first of all traveled farthest to be here with us this evening, but close friend of the family and of Sandy's as well.
BT class of 98. Baltimore Orioles fan, even in Bronx, New York. Birshut Morai v'Rabotai, with the permission of my dear, dear, cherished teachers, Rabbi Wahlberg and Dr. Shore, and delighted to be in the presence of dear friends, colleagues, and teachers, Rabbi Posner, Rabbi Yogev, Rabbi Wecker, Cantor Albrecht. Honored to be sharing the learning tonight with Rabbi Marwick and Rabbi Sheffer, and with great love and respect for Les, and cherished friendship with Dodi and Joey, Rafi, and your family, and thinking of Ilana and Rich. I'm honored to be here, to be home. I think Sandy would want us to acknowledge, I'm sad tonight that an occasion which is meant to be a celebration and a night of learning and uplifting, that we enter darkened by the news from the last 36 hours in Jersey City, close to my current home. Brokenhearted and feeling vulnerable, we reach out to that community with wishes of comfort and solidarity and peace. Indeed, Rabbani Bracha, a long-time connection to this community who now works together with me in Riverdale, is leading a delegation from our shul in Riverdale to Jersey City tonight to represent our communities and support. I'm touched to be able to be here to honor Sandy in my spiritual home, Beth Tefillah, which has given me so much of the grounding, the values, and the community that has made me who I am today alongside the home of my parents. My continued bond with BT as an adult, beyond the bonds of my friendships and my teachers, has truly been thanks to Sandy, who invited me year after year to come and teach once a year in the Yafi Scholars Program, making it possible for me to be here in these hallowed walls, teaching, learning, and continuing to feel connected to each one of you who has made this place the place that it is. So I have to thank her for my annual trip home and for the opportunity to continue to be a part of the Merkaz learning community. And while more than anything I wish Sandy were here tonight in person, I know she'd be telling me about her latest escapades with her grandchildren. She would already be abuzz with ideas for next year's program, great debates in Jewish tradition, hot topics in contemporary Jewish life. And she would be cocking her head in that Sandy way that she did after she shared an idea and she was ready to scrutinize your facial reaction to know how you responded to the idea she put on the table. While more than anything I wish she were here tonight in person, I truly believe, as Dr. Shore said, that tonight's gathering is fully in keeping with her legacy, bringing community together to learn Torah from different voices, exposing us to different points of view and different angles of Torah from different teachers. So in the 7 minutes I have, I want to ask a big question. What is the endeavor of Torah all about? What should our Torah learning do for us, do to us, do with us? Our sages in different ways and in different places throughout rabbinic literature have emphasized to us the idea that when we study Torah, when we learn Torah, when we hear Torah, in some way, every experience of Torah study should be experienced as though we were receiving the Torah anew at Mount Sinai. Every time we learn, when we hear the Torah read in this room, when we pick up a source sheet, when we hear a lecture, somehow we should be re-experiencing Sinai. So to ask the question of what Torah learning in our lives should be like, I want to return to two visions, perhaps complementary, perhaps slightly conflicting, about what happened at Mount Sinai, to try to deepen that question of what should Torah learning be and do for us and with us. The first source you have on the back page of the handout, source 8 from the Talmud in Tractate Sukkah 4b. I think this section really begins on 5a. V'tani Rabbi Yossi Omer me'olam lo yarda shchina lemata v'lo alu Moshe ve'Eliyahu lamarom. The truth is, notwithstanding what it might look like in the Torah, God's presence never really descended fully to earth upon Mount Sinai, and Moshe never fully ascended up into heaven to receive the Torah. We're going to put Eliyahu on the side for the purpose of this learning. As it says, Hashamayim shamayim la'Hashem va'aretz natan livnei adam. There's two separate domains in the world, God's heaven and the earth for human beings. And even in the moment of the giving of the Torah, those worlds were not bridged. What do you mean? The Gemara asks, did the divine presence really never descend below these 10 tfachim into the sort of domain of human existence from the earth and up just a little bit? Doesn't it say, Vayeret Hashem al Har Sinai? God came down on Mount Sinai. Answers the Talmud, Lemala me'asara tfachim. God came down, but not all the way down. But doesn't it say that Moshe went up? Moshe Allah el ha'Elohim. Moshe went up to God. Lamata me'asara. Moshe stayed below this dividing line of 10 tfachim, 10 handbreadths. What the rabbis are struggling with here is facing truly radical verses in the Torah that describe revelation as God coming all the way down and Moshe going all the way up, bridging the worlds of heaven and earth. And they moderate it. They tone it down. Did God descend further than usual? Yes. Did Moshe go up higher than usual? Yes. But did they meet on the same plane? No. Our orientation to God as we study Torah, even if we are to be Moshe Rabbeinu, always has to be looking up a little bit. As close as we come, there's always some space between us. It reminds me of that powerful image on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Michelangelo's fresco, The Creation of Adam, in which that divine finger is reaching down, so to speak, and Adam's hand is reaching up, so to speak, but they never quite touch. We're defined in some way in our relationship with God and Torah by that tiny space, the uncrossable void between us and God. God's word crosses that space, coming to Moshe and then to us, but we don't feel God in visceral, intimate contact. There's no actual shared moment or shared space. By possible comparison, take a look at source 9, another midrash on Revelation found in Shemot Rabbah, taught in the name of Rabbi Berechia. The last source on the bottom of page 6. Amar Rabbi Berechia, Haluchot hayu orkan shisha tfachim. The tablets were 6 handbreadths tall, long. And how did that break down? Kivyachol hayu biyad misha amar v'haya ha'olam shnei tfachim. 2 tfachim were in the hands, it should say, my typo, of the one who spoke the world into being. That's God. Uviyado shel Moshe shnei tfachim. And the bottom 2 handbreadths of the 6 handbreadths of the tablets were held in Moshe's hands. Ushnei tfachim hayu mafrishin ben yad liyad. And 2 tfachim, 2 handbreadths, divided their hands one from another. In some sense, this midrash, I believe, closes the gap. Let's assume it's actually building off the prior text, taking it for granted. So God came down to just above 10 tfachim from the ground, and Moshe reaches up to just below 10 tfachim from the ground. And there's still 2 tfachim, 2 handbreadths of space between them. So Moshe reaches up to 9 tfachim at the top of his hands. By the way, this makes the greatest leader of the Jewish people even shorter than Rabbi Wahlberg. The bottom of God's hand, so to speak, reached down to 11 tfachim. And these 2 tfachim divide between them, mafrishim beinehem. Even though this midrash ends with the division, the space between, I think it's actually about what connects us to God much more than the space that divides us. Because are we really separated from God in this midrash? No. We're holding the luchot together. We know what this feels like. Imagine when you and someone else both hold on to something, even though our hands don't touch. First of all, the thing feels lighter. We're carrying it together. Second, you feel the being on the other side of the object from you. If they move, they adjust position, it impacts the thing you hold together, and you feel it. So is there an unbridgeable divide between us and God? Yes. But is there a greater sense of God in this midrash? Yes. And a feeling that the Torah was not just handed from us to God, but that we hold on to it together. This to me is an amazing vision of what Torah learning should be. When we learn, we strive to actually feel ourselves holding the Torah together with God. We recognize that it's not solely God's, and it's not solely ours. We are partners. God is above and we are below, but we hold the Torah together. And as we move and reposition, and if we could say such a thing, as God moves and repositions, we impact each other. This is a living Torah. Imagine sitting down to hear the Torah reading next Shabbat, or walking into a lecture at Beth Tefillah, or picking up a source sheet as you enter a class, and feeling that what you're entering is not just the Torah that was given to us in a moment where God hovered right above, but a moment in which we felt God on the other side as we held it together. And that we must always try to do that and feel that when we learn. For me, this is the kind of Torah that Sandy believed in and brought about in the world. A dynamic, covenantal Torah. A Torah that brought teachers and students, in a sense, the model of God and Moshe, into relationship with each other over the text that they held together. Sandy empowered students to stretch up, empowered teachers to reach out and to truly meet and engage with each other. And she modeled it. She believed and believes the Torah has something to say to each and every one of us, and each of us can grab hold of it. And here in Beth Tefillah, and in her many incarnations of Jewish education before that, and as a daughter and wife and mother and grandmother, she modeled that relational, dynamic Torah for us. I will miss her. I do miss her, and the way that she embodied that very much. And I strive to create that kind of Torah for my own family and community in commitment to her memory and her legacy. Yehi zichra baruch. May her memory be a source of blessing.
Oh, beautiful. Looking around the room, Sandy would definitely be smiling now. I think she's smiling up above. And she would be very, very happy that at the halfway mark, with a bunch of rabbis speaking, we are running on time. Which is very, very impressive. It tells you how much these rabbis felt about Sandy. When we said 10 minutes, we meant 10 minutes. And there was one rabbi that Sandy had a connection. She never hesitated to use a connection. So she had the connection to Rabbi Exler, so she got him to Yafi Scholars. There was one rabbi who she always could get to teach Yafi Scholars. He had no choice. So Sandy lived at Beth Tefillah, but she davened at Shomer Emunah. So her rabbi was Rabbi Marwick, and Rabbi Marwick's name was every year on the Yafi Scholars roster. He cannot say no to her, and he's going to speak to us next. Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here tonight, to see so many familiar faces, people I know from Silver Spring, people from Baltimore, from Shomrei, and people from the Yafi Scholars. I actually first met Sandy, I think it was 1993. I'm not the class of 98, I'm the class of 95 at the Hebrew Academy. And Ilana was in my class. And I remember a number of times we drove into Baltimore and I met Sandy, and she was truly one of the kindest, warmest people that I'd ever met. And then years later, I got the job at Shomrei, and I met her again, and then she convinced me, or asked in a way that I could not say no, to teach Yafi Scholars. But it was really a very enriching experience. What I'd like to study with everyone tonight is the concept of differentiated instruction. which is it's a term that's thrown around in education. And I'd like to look for a model in the Torah where I think it wasn't done, and it should have been done, according to Rav Hirsch. The next piece of the Rav Hirsch that Rabbi Wahlberg quoted actually criticizes the instruction that Yitzchak and Rivka gave to their sons, their twin sons, Yaakov and Esav, that they should have differentiated the instruction. I also, at the end, want to share with you the guiding principle that Sandy gave to me when I said to her, it sounds like a very diverse crowd at Yafi Scholars, and she had a secret insight for me to make it work, something that I've lived with and lived by for many years since. So let's just review the story. Rivka and Yitzchak were desperate for a child. Rivka could not conceive, and they davened. They prayed fervently, passionately for a child. What happens? Rivka becomes pregnant, and she starts to regret it. Something happened. Something made her regret it. The Torah tells us, it's not in your source sheets. I am not good at advanced planning, so I just put one source in. Number 6, we'll come to it soon. Something happened that made her regret it. And it wasn't just morning sickness. It obviously was something more intense. It says, Vayisrotzitzu habanim b'kirba. Right? The word Vayisrotzitzu is not a common word in Tanakh. It's the only time it appears. So Rashi, at a loss for translation, immediately draws on the Medrash. And he says, Vayisrotzitzu means Lashon Ritza. The fetuses were kicking and running and trying to escape, which is natural. But what surprised her and what made her so upset was, according to the Medrash, when she would pass by a holy place, the baby would kick. When she would pass by an unholy place, the baby would also kick. And she said, I don't understand why I prayed for this. Something is wrong here. She goes to Shem. Shem was the son of Noach. He was a prophet, the greatest prophet of the time. And she says, what's going on? And he says, you have twins. Something that was obviously was not so common at that time. And she's told, you have twins, and each one is different. Each one is going to be a great nation. And she seems to be calmed down by this. This is great. And at first glance, you wonder, it's not the same as my drasha from 2 weeks ago. Don't worry. At first glance, you wonder, why is she calmed down? If you were told one will be great and the other will be terrible, right? 1 out of 2 is not great. It's not what you pray for. So what I believe is that when she was told, you're carrying twins, that's when she calmed down. When she thought she had one baby who was confusing her, who was conflicted and acting hypocritical, she said, I won't know how to raise this child. But when she was told, you have 2 fetuses inside of you, and each one has their own strengths. Yes, one is drawn towards Kedusha, towards holiness. He likes sitting and studying. And the other one is a little wilder, but also with great strengths. She was calm, because she understood what later is codified by Maimonides, that everybody has free choice. Nobody is pre-programmed from before birth or from childhood. Everybody has free choice, in the words of the Rambam, to be a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu or to be a rasha. So she was fine. She said, listen, I have 2 children, I'm carrying 2 children, each one has their strengths, and I'm going to work with it. And she understood, remember her background. She was brought up in a house, according to Chazal, her father was evil, her brother was evil. She understood that your childhood experiences, even your biological drives and tendencies, even childhood trauma does not define you. Right? Avraham Avinu is the greatest example of this. Rabbi Sachs has a beautiful piece where he says that when God said to Avraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladtecha u'mibeis avicha, what God was telling him is, you, Avraham, have the ability to go beyond artzecha, the social forces that people think define them, highlighted by Marx, moladtecha, the biological drives that people think define them, highlighted by Spinoza, umibeis avicha, and the childhood experiences and traumas, highlighted by Freud. You, Avraham, you have free choice. You can move beyond.
And this is something Rivka identified with. So Rivka was up for the challenge. She was calm. I have 2 children. Everything is going to be fine. So what went wrong? And here, Rav Hirsch tells us that he thinks he knows what went wrong. And if you look at source number 6, Vayigdelu hane'arim. I have it here. As long as they were little, no attention was paid to the slumbering differences in their natures. Both had exactly the same teaching and educational treatment, and the great law of education, Chanoch linar al pi darko. Bring up each child in accordance with its own way. Skip to the 3rd paragraph. Just because of that, must each one be brought up lefi darko, according to the presumed path of life to which his tendencies lead, each one differently, to the one great goal of divine service, to try to bring up a Jacob and an Esau in the same college, make them have the same habits and hobbies, want to teach and educate them the same, is the surest way to court disaster. And here Rav Hirsch says, Rivka understood they were different, but they didn't follow through in the way they raised them, in the way they educated them. So what does Chanoch linar al pi darko really mean? What if somebody really has an evil nature, so to speak? Here, Esav was trying to kick every time they passed a place of idolatry. So here the Vilna Gaon in his commentary on Mishlei fills in. He points to a famous Gemara in Tractate Shabbos, where it says if somebody is born with a certain mazel called ma'adim, astrological sign, or the rationalists explain with certain tendencies, that they are associated with blood, they like blood, says the Gemara, they still have many life choices ahead of them. If they like blood, says the Gemara, they don't have to be a murderer. They can be a butcher, they can be a moel, they can be a doctor, they can be a surgeon. There's so many things you can do. Just because you have a certain tendency and a certain drives doesn't mean you have to channel them in the wrong direction. And that's what Rivka understood intuitively from the beginning, but Rav Hirsch says they just didn't follow through. They just didn't educate them, and it's very difficult. And this is a kind of statement, if Rav Hirsch didn't say it, I certainly wouldn't criticize them to this extent, but Rav Hirsch is saying you need to differentiate. You need to give each person what they need in education. Everybody needs to hear things a little differently. There's a famous statement of the Yam Shlomo that says 600,000 people heard God. Everybody heard him a little differently at Har Sinai. Because everybody learns differently, everybody hears differently. Not everybody needs the same thing. And in education, it's 100% true. And if you're going to educate, you have to respect the learning styles, the backgrounds, the strengths, the weaknesses, the challenges. You have to respect the people that you're teaching and work with them and not try to change them, change their essence, change them from who they are. And that is something that I remember having a long conversation with Sandy about this concept of differentiated instruction. And she said to me, don't worry about Yafi scholars. If you were a campus rabbi, you can probably handle it. And she was right. But I don't know if campus rabbi compared to to the diversity in the world. There's a lot of interesting people out there. And it's a real honor to be able to study with different people and to learn from them and to learn with them. So I just want to share at the end, what secret did Sandy tell me about how to make sure that I would be successful in education here and in life? She said the most important thing, right, after everything is done, differentiated instruction and knowing the material, the most important thing is to love what you're doing and to be passionate about it. And when she said it, you could feel it, that she wasn't just telling you something that she read. She was telling you her secret in education. And this is something, a grammatical insight that my good friend Rabbi David Foreman once told me, for those who like grammar, or those who will suffer through it with me tonight, there are different verb forms in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew, and the verb form for teaching is not the causative verb form of hifil. Usually, if I'm causing you to do something, it's in a form called hifil. Hilmid would mean to cause you to learn. But for some reason, the word for teach is lilamed. Limud is called binyan kaved. It's an intense form of lamad, of learning. And Rabbi Foreman pointed out to me that he thinks what the language is teaching us is that real education is not about causing others to learn, it's about learning with them so intensely, with such enthusiasm and passion, that they learn along with you. And she said at the end of everything, with all the differentiated instruction that's all important, the most important thing in learning is to be passionate, to be excited, and to let that excitement carry through, and everybody will learn along with you. And I can't think of a better way to commemorate Sandy and what she stood for than bringing people together through Torah. This was her life, and it's an honor to be here today to study with you and to remember a great woman, and her memory should be a blessing.
When we talked last year, leading up to the Shloshim, about what we could do, it just seemed very obvious that this is what we should do. We should come together and learn. And when we talked about it again for this year, coming up on the year, it also seemed very obvious that we should come together and learn. And I don't think there are so many people who would readily have available so many different rabbis and so many different relationships, because each of us came to Sandy in a different way, as you heard about. I think Rabbi Schaffer, the rabbi of Pikesville Jewish Congregation, who's going to speak next, knew Sandy the least. Never met her, that's right. But he gets to see Dodi and Joey, but Dodi every week. And I think that those who know Dodi know that there's a lot of Sandy in Dodi. And so I think he knew Sandy also. We'll hear about that.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back here, commemorating a woman I've known throughout the course of the year, and sharing stories directly from Dodi and Joey, from Les, but also in watching how Dodi and Les and Joey have carried themselves this past year, always keeping rabbis honest. Even though I never met your wife and your mom, my family had the great privilege of having the first play date with Yona a few weeks ago, Sandy's granddaughter. She's 3 years old. And I have no doubt Yona's wonderment, amazement at everything that was going on is a blessing that she got from her grandmother. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Rabbi Woolberg, Dr. Shore, Rabbi Posner. Thank you to my colleagues, my esteemed colleagues, especially Rabbi Marwick, for concluding your speech with dikduk. I asked for a layup, and that got everyone excited, so I very much appreciate that. Dikduk really gets people going. When Rabbi Posner shared the theme for the evening, he asked us to speak about Torah study. Yeah, he asked us to speak about education. And I thought there's no greater opportunity to celebrate this remarkable woman's life than us becoming students for a brief moment this evening. There is an aspiration that we should all have to be lifelong learners, that when you graduate, your learning is not done. That's when you begin. That's when your student loans start getting paid back, which is a separate conversation. But you should never stop learning. So if you would indulge me tonight, there is one piece of Torah, there's one section, one story in the Torah that every time I have the privilege to study it, to look at it, to examine it, I walk away with a new thought, with a new insight, with something I didn't understand about myself. So if you turn to page number 4, the bottom of the page, source number 7, every time you read the story of the Akedah, you should be amazed. It's an incredible story. It's a fundamental story. It's a story that in each and every generation meant something different to the people of that generation. When you think about the Crusaders, and as they had to face anti-Semitic attacks, terrible, brutal pogroms, the strength that Abraham could make the decision he made gave people like a classic commentary, the Rokeach, who wrote a magnificent commentary on the Torah, that he himself witnessed the terrible act of Crusaders killing his wife and his child. The story of the Akedah gave them tremendous strength. So what does the Akedah mean to us today? I'm going to briefly and very quickly read some of the psukim and try just to point out some things that are noticeable, some things that are noteworthy, and not to give you a complete picture, not to give you a complete share, but to intrigue you, to encourage you to look at the story that some people read every day before they daven, because it is a critical Jewish story, but to encourage you to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes every time you read it, to look at it again. So let's begin. Vayihi achar dvarim ha'ila ve'elokim nisa es Avraham. Vayomer alav Avram vayomer hineni. From the very first go, the language hineni is a language of boldness. Abraham is ready for whatever challenge God throws his way. Remember, Abraham has seen wondrous miracles. Abraham has championed the one God in the world, and there is nothing that can faze Abraham. He says, Hineni. Parenthetically, 2 times in this story he says Hineni. First time he says Hineni to God. Second time, who does he say Hineni to? Enthusiastically. Yitzchak. He says Hineni to Yitzchak. They're on their journey. It's a 3-day journey. This is not a moment of religious fanaticism, 5-minute walk down this. This is a 3-day journey. He has time to think about what he's about to do. And halfway through, Yitzchak, who is going to have to be the passive acceptor of the instruction, Yitzchak says, "Oh, Dad, we forgot an animal." And Avram responds with the word Hineni, bringing forth a certain amount of tension. Because Abraham says both Hineni to God, and Abraham says Hineni to his son. So Abraham internally is challenged by his loyalty to his religion and to his student, to his son. One of the suggestions I want to make tonight is the Akedah is about how we pass on our tradition. Sometimes we sacrifice our kids for our tradition. Sometimes we embolden our kids for our tradition. I wonder if the story of the Akedah is actually a story of connection. And that's how we'll conclude in a minute. But I want to read a couple more psukim. Pasuk number 2. Vayome kachna es bincha. If you want to understand what kind of parent Avraham was, listen to the following pasuk. Kachna es bincha. Take your son. Es yechidcha. Take your only son. Asher ahavta. That you love. What happens in this verse? God says, take your son. And Avram says, I have 2 sons. Which son are you talking about? And God says, take your only son. And Avram says, well, I have Yishmael and Yitzchak. Which one, technically, in your perspective, is your only son? And then God says, Asher ahavta, take the son that you love. And he says, I love both my children. Which one are you talking about? And then the pasuk says, Es Yitzchak. God says, Yitzchak. And those famous words that started it all at the beginning of Abraham's life are the words V'lech lecha. Significant words. Words that indicate what Abraham is about to undertake is of tremendous significance. And what's the instruction? Lech lecha, still verse number 2. Lech lecha al eretz hamoriyah v'haleu sham la'olah al achad heharim asher amar elech. The Bechor Shor, one of the classic commentaries on the Torah, comes along and remarks something stunning. Abraham may have misunderstood the instruction here from God. We all know and we all think, as do many commentaries think, God instructed Abraham to sacrifice his child. The Bechor Shor reads the pasuk very carefully and says you can translate the word v'ha'alehu, which we translate as sacrifice your son. You can translate the word v'ha'alehu to bring him close. So if you translate the word v'ha'alehu to bring him close, you read the pasuk as follows: go to this land to the Moriah, and bring him close to the place that you will sacrifice, to one of the mountains. Meaning, this is not about sacrificing your son, but this is about showing your child, this is about showing your student what it means to be someone who sacrifices for God. In this informative moment, God is saying, Abraham, you're getting old. It's time to pass on the tradition to your children and grandchildren. If you flip over the page, the one major point I want to make about the Akedah, and again to encourage you to read the psukim themselves very, very closely, there's two major points I want to conclude with. Number one, the Akedah is fairly unique because almost every pasuk begins with the letter Vav. Almost every phrase in the story begins with the letter Vav. Ignoring pasuk 4, which is the exception. Vayom Avram el Avram shvu lachem po im hachamar. I'm not going to translate, just hear the Vavs. Pay attention to the Vavs. Va'ani va'anan elcha ad ko, etc., etc. Vayikach Avram es atzei la, vayom Yitzchak, vayom avi, vayom hini, vayom Avram, vayavo el hamakom, vaya'aroch hasetim, vaya'akot. It's like a poorly written story. And they did this, and they did that, and they did this, and they had this conversation, and they went there. Why is the Vav inserted over and over and over again into the Psukim? Because the Vav is a letter that teaches about connections. A Vav connects the word to the previous word. And perhaps the entire story of the Akedah we see as a broken connection, as a break. The Ibn Ezra sees there's a break between Avram and Yitzchak. The Vav insists the Akedah experience is about connection. It's about passing on the tradition. And indeed, every forefather, every foremother that comes afterwards understands there needs to be this Akedah moment. There needs to be a moment where you select one child, whether it be, not to disagree with Rabbi Marwick, whether it be Yitzchak, whether it be Yaakov, or whether it be Yosef. There is a tradition in the family that you need to have an Akedah moment. You need to pass on va'aleyu sham la'olah. You need to pass on the experience of bringing a sacrifice to God. The Akedah is one of the most magnificent of stories that has accompanied the Jewish people throughout history. It's easy to say that the Akedah is a story of deep disconnect because indeed the Psukim seem to indicate that Avram and Yitzchak walk away separately. Avraham returns to Be'er Sheva. The next time we see Yitzchak, he's in a place called Be'er L'chai Ro'i, in a completely different place. And so we may conclude that it's one of separation, but it's really not. It's one of a connection that is not just about physical presence, but it's about what you experience together. I feel blessed to have Sandy's presence in our shul, the continued expression of her values, and the continued commitment that she had to Jewish education and to excellence is one we feel with the participation of her children and her grandchildren in our community. And we feel very blessed to be continuing the journey of both Abraham and Yitzchak as we try to figure out V'ha'aleyu sham la'olah, as we try to figure out how to pass on the experience of being Jewish to our descendants.
I had the privilege for many years of being able to learn from and with Sandy in teaching classes. I showed up as a new rabbi. I was supposed to teach a class to BT in the AM. I was actually partnered up with a Christian theologian, and I was supposed to teach Tehillim with her. What does someone who went for Smicha know about Tehillim? You know that you take it out, you read it, and somehow. So Sandy got me through that and a lot more, and taught me how to teach a little bit, and how to prepare a curriculum a little bit. We would always debate. I thought a good curriculum was like tonight. Everyone's going to talk about some similar theme. That was not curriculum for Sandy at all, and I could never fool her. I could never fool her with that. We're going to learn two more sources, And then we're going to say a Kaddish D'Rabbanan, a Rabbi's Kaddish, which Les will lead us in. And then Les is going to share some closing remarks and head us off to dessert, because Sandy would absolutely want this evening to conclude with a nice, beautiful dessert reception. And I think it really brings together a lot of what was shared here this evening. Rabbi Schaffer just spoke about how when we learn something, we should always learn it new, with new eyes, with fresh eyes, as new students. And Rabbi Marwick spoke about how each of our learning is unique, because each of us is different, and the way that we learn is different from each other. Rabbi Exler spoke about partnership with God in our learning. Rabbi Wahlberg spoke about our own application, seichel, that fifth chelik, which isn't necessarily written anywhere, but where we bring our own sense to the Torah. And Dr. Shore spoke about birth and rebirth through Torah and through learning. And so I want to bring us now to a Gemara. It's on page 2, source number 4. It's a little bit of a daring, a little bit of a chutzpahdik Gemara. And when you learn, you need to sometimes have a little chutzpah and a little tenacity. And Sandy absolutely had those traits in the sweetest possible way. It says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Marav, B'sha'ah she'ala Moshe l'maram, when Moshe went up to the heavens, what did Moshe find there in the heavens? He saw Matzah Kadosh Baruch Hu she'yoshev v'kosher ktarim. Moshe found God sitting and writing a Torah, but what was he writing? He wasn't writing a Torah, he was actually affixing crowns onto various letters in the Torah. Amar lefanav, so you can imagine Moshe was dumbfounded by this. What in the world? First of all, why is God illustrating this? Like, what's with these pictures in the Torah? These crowns on top of letters. And if you open up any Torah, you'll find crowns on top of the letters. But secondly, what's God doing this for? God doesn't have someone to do this for God. So Moshe says, Lord of the universe, who is making you do this? Who's your boss that you're sitting and acting as administrative assistant and affixing crowns to these letters? So Amarlo, God responded, Adam echad yesh. There's a person, there's a man. He's shatid, he's going to come in the future. Atid liyot besof kama darot. He's going to come in many generations from now. There's a man who's going to come. The Akiva ben Yosef Shemo. His name is Akiva ben Yosef, or as we know him, Rabbi Akiva. Shatid lidrosh al kokotz v'kotz tilin shel halachot. That on every single crown, on every thorn and thistle, on every ornamental hair, I have no idea where that translation came from, is going to darshan out, is going to learn out mountains and mountains of halachot. Mountains and mountains of laws. It's going to see, why is there a crown on this particular letter, and how does that crown look, and what is that crown doing there? Must be what we have to learn from here is beyond what's written here. There's something else here for us to learn. This was what God answered Moshe. This is a very, very difficult Gemara. What in the world does this mean? Such a difficult Gemara that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein asks two powerful questions. And he asked this in his Igrot Moshe and his Hakdama, in his introduction to his Igrot Moshe's introduction to his major work of Sheilot V'Tshuvot, of responsa. And you can find the question that he asks on the bottom of page 2. It's in source number 5, and it's about 5 lines up from the bottom. He asks 2 questions. He says, Shalachora lo muvam ashok ktarim. He says, I don't understand the language ktarim. Crowns. That was what Moshe found God doing, attaching crowns. What is crowns? Why the language crowns? That's Moshe's first question. And the second question is Ve'od kasha, she'elat Moshe mi me'akev ma karato bazeh. Also, Moshe's question, mi me'akev, who's forcing you to do this? What did Moshe mean, who's forcing you to do this? Nobody forces God to do anything. Why would he ask God, who's forcing you to do this? I guess God decided to do this. What does it mean, mi me'akev, who's forcing you to do this? Moshe discusses this at length, but just for time's sake, we're going to skip to the next page, page 3. It's the last paragraph in the Hebrew and the last paragraph in the English. Rav Moshe says the following. V'nimtza, in answering his questions, he says, we can find Shetiyot HaTorah, that the letters of the Torah, him malachim, they are kings. Who's the king? It's good to be king. Who's the king? The letters. The letters are the kings. That's why they have crowns on them. And he says the following. The reason they have crowns is she'osim kefi ma shemashma me'atorah lechachmei Torah. Those letters act like kings because they get to do what the sages think that they should do. Even though in the heavens, maybe that is not what God meant when God wrote in the Torah certain psukim, God may not have meant the way that the sages interpret them. But you know who's king? The words, the letters. They have crowns. And if the sages interpret the letters in a particular way, we follow those letters. We follow the interpretations of the sages because those letters are kings. And he explains then, if you go on a little bit further, he says this is exactly what it was meant by mi me'akev, who's forcing you. And says Rav Moshe, very, very powerful. What does it mean to mi me'akev? We'll pick it up in the English where it says who is preventing you. It's like in the middle of the last paragraph, that you should not write the Torah in an explicit fashion so that it should not be possible to interpret it in any way other than your true intention was. Meaning, God, why are you leaving this open for interpretation? Just write what it is. And God answers, it's Rabbi Akiva and all the sages who are going to expound mounds of laws, which is the true expansion of Torah. Hagdalat Torah. It's very beautiful. The way Torah is expanded is through personal interpretation. Now, parenthetically, this does not mean that the Torah is open to everyone's interpretation whenever they feel like it, however they feel like it. Right? I think when it says lo, it really means yes. Right? No, it doesn't work that way. You got to be these Chachmei Yisrael, right? These sages. So you have to learn. You have to be educated. You have to bring something to the table. You have to have some kind of understanding, right? When you do that, you can use those letters as kings with their crowns on their head to interpret, and that is Hagdalat Torah. That is the expansion of Torah, which means that when we sit and we study Torah, and when we bring new ideas, and we have a bunch of rabbis in the room bringing new ideas, and everyone else here, hopefully you thought of things throughout as people were sharing. Torah's growing. Torah's growing. And that's what God wanted. God didn't want to limit Torah to only the way that God imagined it when God had it written. God wanted the interpretation that comes from learning and from expanding. Dr. Shur opened with a challenge. I'm going to close my words with a challenge that we should continue the beautiful learning and the beautiful unity that's felt. It's not too often to get a bunch of rabbis for a bunch of different shuls together and come together. This is just about learning Torah. It's about honoring Sandy, but Sandy's most honored when we come together and we learn Torah. Don't go anywhere, but I want to thank you all for being here and for helping us to honor her and to remember her in such a powerful way. I'm going to ask everyone to rise now in a moment. Les is going to lead us in a Kaddish Rabbanan Rabbi's Kaddish. It's on page 57 of the Siddur. And after that, please be seated again for Les's final concluding words. Rabbi Chanan ben Akashim Amarat HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zokot Yisrael. Lefikach Yerbalam Tamar Tzvot Shnamar Denai Chafetz Saman Tikot Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, יעמוד דברי חירותי, ימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי עדו בית ישראל, בעגול בזמן כל ריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם, ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושגרתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירון ועלמה ויאמרו אמן על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי הון ועל כל מאן דיוסקים באורייתא די באתרא הדין ודי בכל אתר ואתר יהי להון ולכון שלמה רבה חיים וחיזו ורחמים וחיין אריכין וזמן רביחי ופקנה מקדם אבון לשמיה ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה L'chaim Oleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mramav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Oleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen.
Please be seated.
Well, from the bottom of the collective hearts of my family, I would like to wish everyone a good evening and a very sincere thank you for the way that you have come and participated and paid honor to Sandy's memory. It's very, very appreciated. So on behalf of myself and my two daughters in the Samuel and Dressler families, I would like to thank Rabbi Wahlberg, Rabbi Posner, Dr. Shore, Rabbi Exler, Rabbi Marwick, Rabbi Schaffer, and most certainly the new director of Merkaz, Mrs. Chana Slavititsky, for all of the work performed in assembling this program of remembrance of Sandy and her special contribution to Beth Tefillah and the wider Baltimore Jewish community. When we concluded the 30 days of mourning after Sandy's passing last year, Beth Tefillah organized a highly inspiring tribute to Sandy on a theme related to one of her most cherished values, that being a unified singular people, the richness of Jewish knowledge is meant to be shared by all Jews. The idea of the inclusiveness of learning motivated Sandy to excellence. When I spoke at that program last year, I noted how Sandy's late mother, Sylvia Listernick, Zichrona Livracha, was largely responsible for giving a thorough Jewish education to Sandy, and how it became the bedrock of her community, her commitment to the goal of opening learning opportunities, regardless of the level of prior knowledge, to all members of the Jewish community. Sandy, Beth Tefillah, and Merkaz were the perfect match for one another, which is why I often thought of Beth Tefillah as that other Bashert in her life. We observed Sandy's first yurtzeit just 2 weeks ago, on the eve of Thanksgiving. Ironically, just yesterday, our family observed the 16th yurtzeit of Sandy's father, Meir Listernick, Zichrono Livracha. He was a man of few words, a stoical New Englander whose favorite mantra was the no-nonsense, use it up, wear it out, make do, and do without. Grandpa Meyer was a very special individual who bequeathed to Sandy his distinctive work ethic. He was also one of the least complaining people I've ever known. He worked for Harvard University's commissary, heading to work at 3 a.m. every day in order to feed students and faculty for over 50 years. When he retired, Harvard gave him one of their distinctive chairs, as if to say, okay, now it's time for you to relax. But he never really did relax, because he continued to work 2, sometimes even 3 other jobs. During his life, the only thing that concerned Meyer was the thought that perhaps he had overlooked a detail and was not meeting expectations. Like her dad, Sandy was known for her wholehearted work ethic, the serious way in which she tackled tasks, and the thoroughness of her understanding of each issue. Sandy was persistent until she felt personally satisfied that a job was accomplished. She approached all duties wholeheartedly with a sense of mission, and she always performed her tasks good-naturedly, radiating a genuine personal delight in what she was doing. 2 parents, 2 marvelous role models, 1 spectacular Jewish educator. That was our Sandy, which, by the way, makes us especially gratified that Rabbi Stephen Exler in particular, who personally knew and enjoyed the company of Grandpa Meyer, was able to join us tonight and to share his learning and the memories of both daughter and father. And we thank all of the Rabbanim for their learning and their inspiring words and their unity in coming to honor Sandy. Thank you so much. And now it is my pleasure to invite everyone to the dessert reception in the Tubin.